Sign those logs, Artie, or I'll have the sheriff escort you off my property in handcuffs, Ryan screamed, his face turning purple under the high-pressure ammonia pipes. I didn't argue. I just laid my physical access badge on his glass desk and said, "It's all yours, kid." Then I walked out. If you've never stood inside a 400,000 square foot industrial cold storage facility, you don't know what cold really is. It isn't the crisp winter air of a mountain town. It's a heavy, aggressive chill that bites through insulated Carhartt jackets in seconds. The air smells like a mixture of ozone, forklift battery acid, and the faint, sweet scent of cardboard boxes frozen solid at -10 degrees. Underneath it all is the constant, low-frequency rumble of three massive Frick screw compressors, keeping 15,000 pounds of anhydrous ammonia circulating through miles of steel piping. For 25 years, that rumble was my heartbeat. My name is Arthur Vance, though everyone in the Fresno logistics corridor calls me Artie. I started at Caldwell Cold Logistics back in the 90s as a junior technician, grease under my fingernails and a wrench in my hand. The founder, Richard Caldwell, was a self-made giant who built the place from a 3-room potato shed into the largest cold storage hub in Central California. Richard didn't care about fancy titles or corporate speak. He cared about mechanical integrity and keeping the temperature at exactly -10. He taught me how to listen to the machines. He used to say that a good engineer doesn't need a sensor to tell him a compressor rotor is misaligned. He can feel the vibration in the soles of his work boots. Richard paid me well, and as the facility grew, he set up a non-qualified deferred compensation plan, an NQDC under Tax Code Section 409A, to make sure I'd be taken care of when I retired. By the time I hit 50, that account had grown to $350,000 of my own deferred salary, sitting alongside a $250,000 retention bonus that was scheduled to vest on my 30th anniversary with the company. It was my safety net, the reward for 3 decades of freezing my bones to keep his dream alive. The crown jewel of Caldwell Cold Logistics wasn't our commercial customers. It was the USDA Food Safety and Inspection Service contract. We were the designated regional hub for the federal school lunch program and Western Emergency Food Reserves. At any given moment, we had $20 million worth of USDA-certified frozen beef, pork, and dairy sitting in our racks. The contract brought in a steady, government-guaranteed $12 million a year. It was the bedrock of the company, the steady stream of revenue that paid the salaries of 50 blue-collar workers and kept the lights on. But storing that much USDA cargo came with a catch. The federal government doesn't let just anyone run a facility containing 15,000 pounds of toxic anhydrous ammonia. Ammonia is a highly efficient refrigerant, but if a line ruptures, it forms a lethal cloud that can suffocate a neighborhood in minutes. Because of that, the EPA regulates us under Title 40, Part 68 of the Risk Management Program, and OSHA monitors us under the Process Safety Management Standard, 29 CFR Section 1910.119. Under those laws, the facility cannot legally operate without a certified operator of record physically registered to the site. I was that operator. I held a certified ammonia refrigeration operator credential, a CARO license, from the Refrigerating Engineers and Technicians Association. Every single afternoon before I left the facility, I had to log into the EPA's Central Data Exchange, the CDX portal, using a secure hardware token. I had to manually enter the daily receiver tank levels, compressor discharge pressures, and safety valve test logs, then sign the document with a digital certificate. That signature wasn't just a formality. It was a binding legal statement. If I lied on those logs and something went wrong, the federal government could prosecute me personally for perjury. Richard understood that. He never once asked me to cut a corner. If I told him a condenser needed a $20,000 overhaul, he wrote the check without blinking. Then, last autumn, Richard's heart gave out while he was walking the docks. With no children of his own, the ownership of Caldwell Cold Logistics fell to his sister's son, Ryan Caldwell. Ryan was 32, wore tailored suits that looked ridiculous in Fresno's dusty 90-degree heat, and spoke entirely in buzzwords he'd learned at a mid-tier business school. He didn't see a complex mechanical system that kept millions of dollars of food safe. He saw a cash cow that could be trimmed of fat, packaged up, and sold to a Chicago-based private equity firm called Apex Capital. Within 2 weeks of taking over, Ryan brought in a team of consultants who had never set foot in a warehouse. They wore matching Patagonia vests and spent 3 days staring at spreadsheets in our air-conditioned conference room. On the fourth day, Ryan called me into the office. He had a slide deck ready, filled with charts showing how we could increase our operating margin by 30% before the Apex Capital acquisition finalized. I looked at the slides, then I looked at Ryan. The kid was smiling like he had just discovered fire. "We can optimize the maintenance schedule." "Artie," Ryan said, leaning back in his leather chair. "We're spending $80,000 on a 5-year mechanical integrity audit for the ammonia piping next month. That's an unnecessary cash drain. We can defer it until after the sale." I stared at him. "The mechanical integrity audit isn't optional, Ryan. It's a federal OSHA mandate. Our receiver tanks and high-pressure separators are 20 years old. If we don't run the ultrasonic testing on those welds, we're out of compliance." Ryan waved his hand, dismissing me. "It's just paperwork, Artie. I've already talked to a local inspector who's willing to sign off on a basic visual scan for a fraction of the cost. We need that $80,000 on the balance sheet. I need you to log into the CDX portal and approve the waiver." I felt a cold sensation in my stomach that had nothing to do with the warehouse. "I'm not signing a waiver on a system that hasn't been tested, Ryan. If a weld fails on the high-pressure line, we release a cloud of anhydrous ammonia that will kill the crew on the dock, and my name is the one registered on the EPA portal." Ryan's smile disappeared. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You work for me now, Artie. If you won't play ball, I'll find someone who will." What Ryan didn't tell me was that Apex Capital's legal team had already flagged the 5-year mechanical integrity audit in their preliminary due diligence. It was written into the asset purchase agreement as a pre-closing covenant. Ryan was in a hurry to sell because he had amassed massive personal trading debts, and he wanted his cash out quickly. He figured he could pressure me into signing off on a visual inspection, present it to Apex as a completed audit, and pocket the $80,000 while leaving the risk of a pipeline explosion to the new owners. Over the next 3 weeks, the atmosphere in the warehouse shifted. Ryan didn't bring up the mechanical audit again, but I could feel the ice cracking under my feet. He started showing up on the docks with a clipboard, asking the forklift drivers how often I inspected their equipment, checking the timestamps on our maintenance logs, and looking for any excuse to build a file on me. He wanted a reason to get rid of me, but he couldn't just fire me without cause because my contract had a steep severance package. To replace me, Ryan hired a kid named Tyler. Tyler was 26, the son of one of Ryan's golf buddies. He had a degree in supply chain management but had never spent a single hour inside an ammonia plant. Ryan gave him the title of assistant operations manager and put him on a salary that was half of what I was making. Tyler's job wasn't to learn the system. His job was to shadow me and learn where I kept the physical keys and how I navigated the SCADA control screens. I watched Tyler stumble through his daily tasks. He didn't know the difference between a liquid receiver and a suction accumulator. He didn't understand that you don't just shut off an ammonia valve quickly because the hydraulic shock, or liquid hammer, can rupture a steel pipe. I tried to teach him, but he had the same arrogant attitude as Ryan. He figured if it wasn't on a spreadsheet, it didn't matter. He would leave compressor logs blank, forget to check the oil levels in the rotary screw pumps, and walk past safety alarms like they were background music. The setup happened on a Tuesday. We had a shipment of federal USDA butter coming in, 6 truckloads that needed to be staged in room 4, our deepest freezer. I had assigned our lead forklift driver, a 20-year veteran named Bobby, to handle the unloading. But while Bobby was on his lunch break, Tyler decided to show Ryan how fast he could get the job done. He ordered a temporary dock worker, who had been hired through an outside agency that morning and had zero training on our heavy electric pallet jacks, to start unloading the trailers. 10 minutes later, I heard the crash. The temp worker had lost control of a double-length electric jack carrying 4,000 pounds of butter. He had rammed it straight into the structural support column of the Room 4 evaporator unit. The impact bent the steel support and cracked the main glycol runoff line. Glycol, the antifreeze agent we used in the floor warming systems, began spraying across the dock. If the jack had hit 6 inches to the left, it would have sheared off the liquid ammonia feed line, releasing a cloud of toxic gas that would have put the entire Fresno Industrial Park in the hospital. I ran to the dock, hit the emergency isolation valve for the glycol line, and ordered everyone off the floor. I was furious. I found Tyler standing there, pale and staring at the leaking green fluid. "Who authorized this operator to run the heavy jacks?" I demanded. Tyler stammered, looking back at Ryan. who was walking down the dock steps from his second-floor office. "It was an accident, Artie," Ryan said, his voice loud enough for the entire crew to hear. "Accidents happen. But what I want to know is why our safety training logs show this temp worker was cleared to operate equipment." I turned to Ryan. "He wasn't cleared. He was hired 4 hours ago. He hasn't even completed the basic OSHA safety walkthrough." Ryan pulled a folder from his jacket. "That's not what the shift log says. The digital log signed off under your manager credentials this morning says all temporary staff were cleared for equipment operation." I felt my jaw tighten. I hadn't touched the digital log that morning. I had been in the compressor room checking the oil levels on the Frick units. I looked at Tyler, who wouldn't meet my eye. I realized then that Tyler had used my terminal, which was logged into the warehouse management system. "While I was in the back, this is a setup, Ryan," I said, keeping my voice level. "I didn't sign that log. You're the lead operations manager, Artie." "The buck stops with you," Ryan said, and for the first time in weeks, his smug smile returned. "This is gross negligence. You allowed an untrained operator to damage critical cooling infrastructure, risking a catastrophic ammonia release." He gestured to 2 security guards who were standing behind him. "I didn't even know we had security guards until that moment. Artie, you are being terminated immediately." "For cause," Ryan declared. The words hung in the cold air of the dock. For cause. In the corporate world, those 2 words are a death sentence for your benefits. Under Section 8B of my Executive Non-Qualified Deferred Compensation Agreement, if I was terminated for gross negligence or willful misconduct, the company had the right to claw back all unvested contributions. By firing me for cause, Ryan was wiping out my $350,000 in deferred compensation. He was also voiding the $250,000 retention bonus that was set to vest in just 6 months. With one manufactured incident, Ryan had just saved the company $600,000. Money that would go straight to the bottom line, making the company look even more profitable to the private equity buyers at Apex Capital. He expected me to scream. He expected me to threaten him, to make a scene in front of the crew, to give him a reason to call the police and have me escorted out in handcuffs. That's what his MBA handbook probably told him would happen. Instead, I took a deep breath. The cold air filled my lungs, clearing my head. I looked at the bent steel column, then at Tyler's trembling hands, and finally at Ryan's smirking face. I realized something Ryan hadn't. He thought he was playing a game of checkers, and he had just taken my piece. He didn't realize he was sitting at a table where the board was about to slide off the edge. "Let me get my things," I said quietly. I walked up to the mezzanine, went to my desk, and packed my personal items into a small cardboard box. I took my RETA certification plaque off the wall. I gathered my personal reference manuals and my thermos. As I walked back down, Ryan met me at the exit door. He held out his hand. "Your access badge, Artie, and your company phone." I laid the phone and the plastic badge on the corner of his desk. I looked him in the eye. "The temperature in room 4 is already starting to rise, Ryan. You need to purge the air from that glycol line, or the floor under the freezer will heave and crack the foundation." "I'll have Tyler handle it," Ryan replied, not even looking at me as he took the badge. "We don't need you anymore." I smiled, picked up my box, and walked out into the bright Fresno sun. I drove home in silence. The air conditioning in my truck hummed against the 95-degree Central Valley heat. When I got to my house, my wife, Elena, looked at the cardboard box in my arms. She didn't ask any questions. She just poured me a glass of iced tea and sat down with me at the kitchen table. "I'm out," I told her. She nodded slowly. "How much did they take?" "Everything," I said. "My deferred compensation, the retention bonus, 600 grand. The kid set me up with a falsified safety log on a broken pallet jack." Elena didn't panic. She had known Richard Caldwell for 20 years, and she knew the business almost as well as I did. "What's the next move?" she asked. I took a sip of my tea. "I don't have to make a move, Elena. The system is going to make it for me. I just have to follow the law." I went into my home office and opened my personal laptop. I didn't log into Caldwell's network. I didn't touch their SCADA system, and I didn't use any company passwords. Doing any of that would have violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and Ryan's lawyers would have used that to bury me. Instead, I went directly to the official federal EPA Central Data Exchange website, the CDX portal. As a licensed certified ammonia refrigeration operator, my CARO credential is tied directly to my Social Security number and registered with the Refrigerating Engineers and Technicians Association. When I was hired as the lead operations manager, My license was officially linked to Caldwell Cold Logistics EPA Facility Registry Service ID. Under Title 40, Section 68 of the Code of Federal Regulations, an operator of record is legally liable for the safety and compliance of the ammonia systems under their supervision. Now that I was no longer employed there, leaving my license attached to that facility was not just a risk, it was a federal offense. If Tyler messed up a valve alignment tomorrow and leaked ammonia into the neighborhood, I would be the one facing criminal charges for falsifying reports. I inserted my personal hardware security token into the USB port, passed the two-factor authentication, and navigated to the Risk Management Plan submission page. I selected the Caldwell Cold Logistics Fresno facility. I clicked a single button, Revoke Designation as Operator of Record. The system asked for a reason. I typed, Termination of Employment, effective immediately. I uploaded a copy of the termination letter Ryan had handed me, digitally signed the submission with my federal certificate, and hit Submit. The entire process took less than 5 minutes. By doing that, I hadn't broken a single rule. I had simply protected myself. But in the highly regulated world of federal logistics, that 5-minute task was the equivalent of pulling the master pin out of a suspension bridge. The moment my license was unlinked, the EPA's automated compliance engine updated the facility's status. Caldwell Cold Logistics went from compliant to immediate operator deficiency. Normally, the facility would have had 2 backup operators on record. But our second operator, a guy named Dave, was currently away on FMLA leave caring for his sick mother. The third operator, a young tech named Carlos, was so disgusted by my firing that he walked in the next morning, threw his keys on Ryan's desk, and resigned on the spot. Carlos didn't want his license associated with a plant that had a bent evaporator and a glycol leak. Suddenly, the giant warehouse had 0 certified operators of record. Because Caldwell held a multi-million-dollar USDA contract to store federal emergency food reserves, their systems were plugged directly into the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service database. The USDA has a zero-tolerance policy for safety violations. Their contract explicitly states that the storage facility must maintain full compliance with all EPA Risk Management Program and OSHA Process Safety Management standards at all times. If a facility loses its certified operator, the system automatically flags it as a high-risk site. At 8 o'clock the next morning, Sarah Lynn, the regional USDA FSIS compliance officer, got an automated red flag alert on her terminal in San Francisco. Sarah was 50, sharp, and had been inspecting food facilities for 20 years. She knew me well. She knew I was the only reason that 30-year-old Caldwell facility ran as clean as a whistle. When she saw my name had been removed from the registry, she knew something was wrong. She didn't call Ryan. She just got into her government-issued sedan and drove straight to Fresno. Over the next 3 weeks, the situation inside the warehouse deteriorated from bad to catastrophic. Without a certified engineer on site, Ryan tried to keep the facility running by ordering Tyler to manage the SCADA control panels. But Tyler didn't know how to balance the ammonia liquid load. He ignored the high-level alarms on the suction accumulator. The liquid ammonia levels crept higher and higher, threatening to carry over into the compressor intakes and destroy the rotary screw pumps. Worst of all, Ryan refused to pay for the repairs on the broken glycol warming line under room 4. Without the circulation of warm glycol, the extreme sub-zero cold from the freezer room began to seep deep into the soil beneath the concrete floor slab. Over the course of 20 days, the water in the soil froze, expanded, and began to lift the heavy concrete structure. It was a classic frost heave. A massive 3-inch crack opened up across the entire width of room 4, throwing the storage racks out of alignment and threatening to collapse the ceiling. By the time Sarah Lynn arrived for her unannounced safety audit, the warehouse was a disaster zone. She walked past the long line of refrigerated semi-trucks waiting to unload and entered the main office. She didn't ask for a tour. She walked straight to the front desk and demanded to see the facility's active EPA CDX registration and the daily signed ammonia pressure logs. Ryan came running down the stairs, trying to flash his best corporate smile. "Miss Lynn, welcome to Caldwell Cold Logistics," Ryan said, holding out his hand. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm Ryan Caldwell, the CEO." Sarah ignored his hand and laid her folder on the counter. "Where is Artie Vance?" she asked. "Arthur Vance is no longer with the company," Ryan said, his smile stiffening. "We had to let him go due to some operational issues, but we've transitioned the management to our new assistant operations manager, Tyler." "Is Tyler a RETA-certified CARO or CARDO operator?" Sarah asked, her voice flat. Ryan blinked. Well, Tyler has a degree in supply chain management from— I don't care about his degree, Ryan, Sarah interrupted. Under USDA Contract Section 12B, this facility must have a certified operator of record registered with the EPA to store federal food reserves. Your EPA registration shows an immediate deficiency. Ryan's face paled. We're in the process of updating the paperwork. It's just a transitional delay. It's not a delay, Sarah said. I just walked your docks. You have a glycol line leaking. Your room 4 concrete floor has a 3-inch frost heave crack that has compromised the structural columns, and I can smell ammonia vapor near condenser number 3. This is an immediate active hazard to public safety and federal property. She pulled out a stack of red adhesive USDA detention tags from her bag. Effective immediately, I am issuing a USDA hold and detain order on all federal cargo currently stored in this facility. Not a single pound of food leaves this warehouse, and no incoming trucks are allowed to unload. She turned and walked onto the dock to begin slapping the red tags onto the racks of frozen meat. By noon the next day, the Fresno logistics corridor was in complete gridlock. 30 refrigerated semi-trucks, their diesel engines idling and reefer units humming to keep their cargo cold, were lined up along the access road, blocking traffic all the way to the highway. Inside the warehouse, the atmosphere was chaotic. USDA inspectors were walking the aisles, attaching bright red USDA hold and detain tags to every single pallet of federal beef, pork, and cheese. Bobby and the other forklift drivers sat in the break room, their machines parked. Under federal orders, they couldn't move a single piece of cargo. The dispatch office was in pandemonium, with freight brokers screaming over the phones as shipping lines faced tens of thousands of dollars in delay penalties. Then, Ryan's phone started ringing. It was Apex Capital, the private equity firm in Chicago. They had a local analyst in California who had spotted the USDA hold status on the Federal Registry. The lead partner at Apex was furious. Caldwell's $12 million USDA contract was the entire basis of the $40 million acquisition valuation. If that contract was canceled, the company was worth next to nothing. They sent a formal letter stating that if the USDA hold wasn't lifted within 48 hours, they were officially withdrawing their acquisition offer. Ryan tried to bypass the lockout. He called every independent mechanical contractor in the Central Valley, offering triple rates for someone to come in and sign the EPA logs. Around 2 o'clock, an older independent engineer named Dave Miller arrived at the facility. Dave was a veteran who had worked on ammonia systems for 30 years. He walked into the compressor room, looked at the SCADA screens, and then walked out to the dock where the pallet jack had hit the evaporator column. Tyler was standing there, sweating through his polo shirt. "Is the paperwork ready?" Ryan asked Dave, waving a clipboard. "We just need you to log in and sign off on the daily safety compliance report." Dave looked at the bent steel column, the cracked concrete floor, the glycol residue, and the suction accumulator pressure gauges. "Where's your 5-year mechanical integrity audit report?" Dave asked. "We deferred it," Ryan said, waving his hand. "We'll get to it next quarter. Right now, we just need the signature to get the USDA off our backs." Dave laughed, a dry coughing sound. "You want me to log into a federal portal, using my personal RETA license, and certify under penalty of perjury that a 30-year-old plant with a bent evaporator support, a 3-inch frost heave, a leaking condenser, and an overdue mechanical audit is safe?" "It's just a formality," Ryan insisted. "We'll pay you $10,000 just for the signature." "You don't get it, kid," Dave said, packing his pressure gauges back into his toolbox. "If this system ruptures and leaks ammonia, the EPA will look at who signed that log. I'm not going to federal prison in California just to save your acquisition. You need to call Artie Vance. He's the only one who knows how to keep this old beast running." Dave walked out, leaving Ryan standing on the dusty dock. At 3 o'clock, my personal phone rang. I was sitting on my back porch, enjoying the quiet, when Ryan's name popped up on the screen. I handed the phone to Frank Martinez, a veteran labor attorney who had been a close friend of Richard Caldwell for 30 years. Frank had already reviewed my employment contract and the NQDC agreement. Frank put the call on speaker. "Artie," Ryan screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "What did you do to the EPA registry?" "The USDA has locked down the entire warehouse. We have 30 trucks blocking the highway, and the police are threatening to tow them." "You're speaking to Frank Martinez, Ryan," Frank said, his voice calm and professional. "I am Arthur Vance's legal counsel." "I don't want to talk to a lawyer," Ryan yelled. "Artie sabotaged our system. He deleted his credentials from the registry. That's tortious interference, and it's a federal crime. I'm going to have the sheriff arrest him. Mr. Caldwell, Frank said, leaning back in his chair, my client did not delete his credentials. He simply notified the EPA that he is no longer the operator of record for your facility. As he was terminated yesterday, leaving his name on your license would be a violation of federal law under Title 40 of the Code of Federal Regulations. If he had signed those logs today, he would have committed perjury. Are you suggesting my client should commit a federal crime for your benefit? Ryan went quiet for a second, then his tone shifted from angry to desperate. Artie, look, we had a misunderstanding. The pallet jack incident, we can overlook it. I need you to come back. Just sign the logs today so we can get the trucks unloaded. We can talk about a consulting fee. I leaned closer to the phone. The consulting fee isn't the issue, Ryan. Have you purged the air from the glycol line in room 4 yet? No, Ryan muttered. Tyler's still working on it. If you don't purge that line, the floor is going to freeze and heave, I said. That will crack the foundation slab, and the entire freezer room will collapse. It's an $80,000 repair if you do it now. It's a $2 million rebuild if you wait. Artie, please, Ryan pleaded. Just come back and sign the logs, Mr. Caldwell, Frank cut in. My client will not sign any documents for a facility that is currently out of compliance. Furthermore, we are preparing a formal civil complaint for breach of contract regarding the bad faith forfeiture of Arthur's NQDC account and his retention bonus. We will also be filing a whistleblower report with the California Labor Commissioner for retaliatory termination. We'll see you in court, Ryan, Frank said, and hung up the phone. By Thursday morning, the pressure on Caldwell Cold Logistics had reached a breaking point. The USDA was charging the company a $50,000 daily penalty for noncompliance, and the truck lines were billing them thousands in trailer detention fees. To make matters worse, the temperature in room 4 had risen to 0 degrees. The glycol pipe had frozen completely, causing the concrete floor to expand. A 3-inch crack had opened up across the center of the freezer floor, exactly as I had predicted. Apex Capital sent a formal letter stating that if the USDA hold wasn't lifted by Friday at 5 o'clock, they were officially withdrawing their $40 million acquisition offer. That was the catalyst the board of directors needed. The board was controlled by Richard Caldwell's widow, Martha, and 3 retired local businessmen who had helped Richard start the company. They owned 80% of the shares. Ryan only owned a small minority stake that had been left to him. The board members weren't MBA theorists. They were old-school Valley folks who understood that a warehouse is only as good as the people who run it. On Thursday afternoon, Martha called an emergency board meeting. She didn't ask Ryan for his opinion. She used her voting power to strip him of his CEO title and place him on administrative leave. Then, she called Frank Martinez. We need Artie back, Martha told Frank. Name the terms. At 9 o'clock on Friday morning, Frank and I walked into the Caldwell conference room. Ryan was sitting in the corner, his tie loosened, looking exhausted. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Martha sat at the head of the table with the other board members on her left. Thank you for coming, Artie, Martha said, her voice soft but firm. We're sorry about how this was handled. Richard would be ashamed of what happened here. I nodded. I appreciate that, Martha, but we need to fix this facility before it falls apart. Frank Martinez opened his leather folder and slid a copy of our proposed agreement across the table. Here are our terms for Arthur's return, Frank said. First, the company will immediately reinstate Arthur's non-qualified deferred compensation plan, acknowledging that the termination was without cause. The $350,000 will be fully vested. Second, the company will pay the $250,000 retention bonus in full today, rather than waiting for the 30th anniversary. Third, Arthur will not return as an employee. Instead, Caldwell Cold Logistics will sign a 24-month independent consulting agreement with Arthur's private LLC. His firm will oversee all safety compliance and mechanical audits. The retainer will be $20,000 a month, paid in advance on the 1st of each month. Fourth, the company will immediately authorize the $80,000 5-year mechanical integrity audit to be conducted by Dave Miller's firm under Arthur's supervision. And finally, Ryan Caldwell is to be stripped of all operational authority and barred from entering the Fresno facility. Ryan stood up, his face red. This is extortion, Ryan yelled. $20,000 a month for a consultant? That's twice what we were paying him. And you're barring me from my own family's company? Martha looked at Ryan, her eyes cold. Sit down, Ryan. You had your chance to run this business. You nearly destroyed it in 3 weeks. If we lose the Apex sale and the USDA contract, this company is bankrupt. She turned back to me and picked up a pen. We accept, Artie. Within 30 minutes, the contracts were signed and the wire transfers were initiated. By 10:30, my bank account showed the cleared funds for my deferred compensation and the retention bonus. I put my Carhartt jacket back on and walked down to the compressor room. The place was a mess. Tyler was sitting at the controls, looking like he was about to cry. I walked up to him, tapped his shoulder, and pointed to the door. "You're done, kid," I said. "Get your things." Tyler didn't argue. He grabbed his bag and walked out. I spent the next 3 hours balancing the ammonia levels, purging the air from the glycol system, and stabilizing the suction accumulator pressure. Once the mechanical systems were steady, I logged into my personal laptop, opened the EPA CDX portal, and re-registered my CARO license as the operator of record for Caldwell Cold Logistics. I called Sarah Lynn at the USDA. "Sarah, it's Artie," I said. "The system is balanced and I'm back on the registry. Dave Miller's crew is arriving tomorrow morning to start the 5-year integrity audit. I'll be there in 10 minutes to remove the tags, Artie," she replied. "Welcome back." By 1 o'clock, the red USDA tags were off the racks. The forklifts were running again, and the long line of refrigerated semi-trucks began moving through the gates to unload. The rumble of the Frick compressors felt steady and strong under my feet. As I walked out to the dock, I saw Ryan packing his belongings into his sports car. He was being reassigned to a small, non-refrigerated dry storage yard in the desert near Bakersfield, where the only thing he would be managing was pallets of empty plastic bottles. He looked at me, but he didn't say a word. He just got into his car and drove away. I stood on the dock, watching the trucks roll in. The dry Fresno heat was rising, but inside the warehouse the temperature was exactly where it belonged. A steady, freezing -10 degrees.